Welcome to the Manic podcast, where we respect fashion's past, analyze fashion's present, and get excited about fashion's future. I'm Liberty Imhoff, founder and creative principal of fashion media company Manic. Several times per week, I'll bring you episodes about exciting things happening in fashion, discussion about current issues facing the industry, and the places and people that have made the fashion industry great. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on Instagram at the Manic Podcast and at Manic Metallic, both linked in our show notes. Now, let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to the Manic Podcast. I'm Liberty, your host. We're finally getting into the holiday season. Anybody else excited? I am, and not for consumerist reasons. We'll chat a bit more about holidays and fashion in the coming week, but what I want to quickly bring up is this. I'm thinking that this season of the Manic Metallic podcast will end just before Christmas. Our podcast did 21 episodes last season, and we're going to land around that this season as well. I'm thinking that season 3 will likely start sometime around the end of January, beginning February. A month is usually a good break for me, and it gives me time to plan out the upcoming podcast season. With that out of the way, let's get into today's episode. 2 words. Social media. What is going on with the social media world? Twitter is going off of a cliff. Meta, the company formerly known as Facebook, just laid off 11,000 workers, which is 13% of its staff. And according to an article in NPR that I recently read, the tech industry in general has laid off around 35,000 workers just this month. Then there's Elon's infamous Twitter slash laying off 3,700 employees, which is 50% of its workforce, along with throwing out the company's CEO, CFO, and top legal counsel. Yes, I feel for the tech workers that lost their position. It's always tough when that happens. But I'm alarmed at the effect that this social media upheaval could have on the fashion industry, primarily because fashion has so much tied up in the social media landscape. Fashion has given so much to social media platforms and has ceded valuable ground to social media and its various commentators in the process that I have to wonder, have we stopped to ponder what would happen if fashion's dependency on social media as an integral way that it does business all came crashing down? Let's go through some what ifs here. What if Twitter completely implodes and, if not outright disappearing, it becomes a complete cesspool of harassment and misinformation, also known as lies? Where do Twitter users go? This is an issue that platform users are facing now. Mastodon could take on Twitter's users, and it is supposedly the most similar. But I read about Mastodon and how to use it in a recent CNBC article, and I gotta say, I was looking through the article and thinking, what on Satan's earth did I just read? I'm pretty savvy at tech, but the directions for how to use Mastodon seem extra labyrinthian. My thought is that people are only going to hop over to Mastodon and use it if they are desperate for a Twitter replacement and are truly devoted to the social media tech cause. Because otherwise, why use a complicated social media platform when you could, not? I'd rather go outside and take a walk. So, where does that leave an anti-Elon Twitter user that wants a text-based alternative? Options are non-existent. Luckily, the industry overall wasn't a heavy user of the platform, except for a few fashion media types. But the HFT, that's to say high fashion Twitter, community is going to be left, high and dry. Next what if? What if Meta fumbles the football and turns the ball over to TikTok? This could be an easy answer. Fashion brands would simply invest in TikTok, right? Well, it's not actually that simple. There are plenty of people who are loyal to Instagram and are just never going to be TikTok people. If you're steeped in regularly using social media for work or personal reasons, you might not see why it's that important to some people to not be on TikTok. After all, they're just social media platforms, right? But you've got to take personal preferences into account. That's why it's important to keep a presence on the social media platforms where your users are, if you must do them at all. But if Instagram starts making people unhappy enough with its changes, It creates a bad environment for the pro-Instagram, anti-TikTok crowd. Where do they go? And this is important for fashion companies. How do you keep in contact with those folks? More on that later. Then you've got people that are concerned about the security and safety of using TikTok at all. What do you do as a fashion company for those people if you start diving into TikTok, but your users don't want to follow you? I know it seems like TikTok and fashion are aligning nicely right now, but not everyone is there. And the point of my long what if here is that the industry didn't stop to think of what it will do if Meta goes bust at any point. Getting in bed with TikTok may or may not be the best alternative for fashion, because you'd be transferring your platform worship from one social media company to another. It's never wise to sell your soul to anyone, especially tech companies that see their users as data gold mines. And here's the real what if kicker. What if we woke up and there were no more social media channels? What if there were no more Twitters, no more Facebooks and Instagrams, no more TikToks, no more Pinterests and Snapchats, no more YouTubes? What would we do? That's why it's a good idea to continually recognize that a social media strategy is not a marketing strategy. Social media is only one aspect of marketing, yet so many in fashion treat it like it's everything. How many followers can my brand get? How many influencers can I get to come to my fashion show so that my show will go viral? Or, oh, that person's talented, but they don't have a large following, so they must not be that good because they're not popular enough. And I know that social media has its uses. Manic Metallic has social media channels, obviously. But fashion companies need to be diversifying our marketing strategies if we're going to be successful in the fashion world and beyond. We can't let the psychotic Elon Musk or the excessively egotistical Mark Zuckerberg determine the success or failures of our businesses. Because if the industry keeps going deeper into the social media Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, it won't be able to find its way out. Plus, with social media, you're ultimately not in control of the platform that you communicate on with your audience. These social media companies have too much power, and we need to take it back from them. So here's a taste of what Manic Metallic has in store for our company over the next year or so. This isn't all-encompassing, but it's a good primer. One thing that we're going to be focusing on is building out our newsletter. We've had it now for almost a year, and we've been sending out newsletters on a bi-weekly basis, so every 2 weeks. And I've enjoyed getting to build what I see as a more direct and intimate relationship with our audience. We've started off by giving newsletter subscribers regular updates on what Manic Metallic is doing as a company, discussing our latest content on our various platforms, and offering brief news on different topics in the industry. What we're going to be adding is a new layout with more content. The newsletter will start with company updates, short musings on today's fashion industry, and brief discussion of our latest content. It will then move into a section that I'm titling, Good Things Come in Threes. This section is going to have 3 recommendations for content pieces that I believe you should check out, and a 1 to 2 sentence summary of each. One will be a fashion sustainability article, one will be a fashion tech article, and the other will be a wild card. So it could be an article, a podcast episode, a YouTube video, whatever I see as relevant and exciting for our audience to know about. After that section will come a section that I'm calling the Fashion Isn't Art Spotlight. Here we're going to give a 1-paragraph spotlight on an artist, whether that be a fashion illustrator, a fashion photographer, fashion designer, etc., that's currently exciting the world of fashion. This section is going to be exciting for me because I love to learn about what other creative individuals are doing and then teach others about those creatives. The last section will be titled Manic Metallic's Fashion Culture Recommendations. I'll be recommending 1 to 2 exhibitions, films, fashion books, events, etc. that relate to the world of fashion and giving a brief 2 to 3 sentence description on the aforementioned cultural piece. This newsletter is going to be educational, interesting, and in some cases intriguing. So if it sounds like something that you think you'd like to receive every 2 weeks, I'd love for you to subscribe to the newsletter. The link to it's in the show notes. And if you have any trouble finding it, DM me on Instagram at manicmetallic or email me at hello@manicmetallic.com. That's HELLO at manicmetallic.com. And I'll help you to get set up and subscribe. Another thing that we're also going to be doing is, surprise, going all in on our podcast. Our listeners love the Manic Metallic podcast. I like making the episodes, so I believe that this podcast has strong potential to be one of Manic Metallic's cornerstones going forward. This past year of making a podcast, spread over 2 seasons, has been an exercise in me figuring out how to create a schedule that allows Manic to write articles, do podcasts, create social media content, and go all out for in-person events to meet people all at the same time. We're not a big company like Vogue or Business of Fashion, where we have so many people that can split duties or where we get commissioned out some of the work. We're a startup, which means that I wear about 1,000 hats. I've come to the conclusion that instead of doing 3 to 4 episodes per week and making the structure of each podcast too rigid, I would much rather do one really good episode per week so that I can give it my all while also having time for the other aspects of my business. I've also decided that though I like the Who Is episodes, the What Was episodes, the ones where I discuss 3 things that I'm excited about, etc., I work best when I'm able to get onto an episode and just float. Sure, I like to have a few notes, but I don't want to have everything noted down. I want these episodes to be as if I'm having a conversation with you over dinner, or drinks, or during a walk in the park. I want to be more natural. This isn't to say that I'll never do any of the Who Is or What Was episodes again, but they won't be the only podcast content that we have. If you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe to our podcast, give us a, hopefully positive, rating, and leave us a written review. It's going to help more and more people to discover us and see what Manic Metallic is doing to change fashion as usual. Also, share us with your family and friends. The more the merrier. Of course, we're also going to be working on a few special projects next year, but more on that as we get closer to working on them. And then there's this. We're starting a series called The Designer Interviews. The goal of this series is to chronicle the young, independent fashion design scene. We're primarily looking for designers that have been in the business from 0 to 5 years, but if a designer is excellent, then we may make an exception. We first announced this project earlier this year and took our time to craft the questions that will be asked, of which there will be 21, and which will be the same for each designer, because we want this to be a wealth of information. The questions are now finished, and we're looking for our first subjects. Chosen designers will be given the questions, and the interviews will be featured on our website. Some of these designers will also be interviewed on our podcast after the questionnaire is completed, and these special episodes will be featured as bonus content. We can't wait for the series to begin because we know you're going to love it. What is so important about what we're now going to be doing with our newsletter, our podcast, our interview series, and our upcoming special projects is that we're not centering our whole fashion media company on social media. That was always a mistake when fashion companies started doing it, and it's still a huge mistake that, for whatever reason, the fashion industry still keeps making. Manic Metallic isn't going to join in that. You'll still see us on social media every so often, but it will not be the center of our business because we want to build a closer and more authentic relationship with our audience. And that's going to be it for this episode. Join our newsletter, subscribe to our podcast, tell your family, friends, and acquaintances to support us as well, and I'll see you in next week's episode when we get into a bit of holiday spirit. Thanks for listening. If you got value out of today's episode, it'd mean a lot to me if you rate, review, and subscribe to the Manic Metallic podcast. Be sure to tell all of your fashion-inclined friends and coworkers about the podcast as well. This would really help us to spread our message about fashion being an art, discipline, and force for societal change. And don't forget to stay in touch with us by subscribing to the Manic Metallic newsletter and following us on Instagram. Feel free to reach out to us through either of those means. I'd love to hear from you. I'll link these all in the show notes. You're the best. See you next episode.